Micheál Martin came in here and walked into my restaurant and said, get out, and I don't care if he sees this. Wouldn't let him near the place. Absolutely, because he destroyed our industry for being so weak. He'd never stood up to what Neffet were saying. So who's running the country? Is it our government, or is it Neffet? Is it senior civil servants behind the scenes that we don't know about? But it's certainly not this government. I own Treyvaud's restaurant with my brother Mark down here in Killarney. A lot of people would know me from a lot of TV work that I've done on Virgin Media. I have 2 shows on Amazon Prime and on Virgin, Treyvaud Travels, Treyvaud's Kitchen. We are here, this is our 19th year in the restaurant, and I thought it was going to get easier as from the day we started, but current climate would, make you think differently. But yeah, that's what I do. So own the restaurant here, 35 years hospitality experience, and do a lot of stuff on the TV too.
We hear so much about the hospitality sector as regards COVID, and I think it's fair to say that your industry is one of, if not the hardest hit economic sector in this entire 2-year bonanza that we've had. So what has it been like to be a restaurant owner during this whole chapter of Irish history?
Sure. So, March of last year, of 2020, we shut down. We shut down voluntary, like most other restaurants did around the country, before we were told we had to, because we saw what was coming, or what we thought was coming. And since then, we've been open the best part of maybe 4.5 months since those last 18 months. So life as a restaurateur was, for 4.5 months we worked, and for the other 13, 14 months we were closed. So we flipped, we adapted, we did, and I said we couldn't really do an outdoor or kind of a takeaway system because our food wouldn't lend to. You can't ask for a rare steak, pick it up and get home 20 minutes later and still expect that steak to be the same way. So what we did is we flipped into a pop-up deli. And we did that from, say, May to June of last year until we could reopen in July. And as soon as they locked us down again in October, I said to the guys, we're doing it until we're allowed to reopen. I said, because there's no way they're going to have us back open by the end of October. So I said, we're going to make a Christmas pop-up deli, which is exactly what we did. And was it ideal? Far from it. Did we lose money? Of course we did. We didn't lose as much as we would have done if we just had shut shop altogether. But the most important thing and the single main reason as to why we did it was to keep the whole team together. And that has been the best decision we have ever made, because even though it went on for 9 months, and it was a very tough 9 months, when we reopened at the end of July, we had our full team again, which was pretty much unheard of, because most places had lost it to hotels because the government allowed hotels to open up before us. So we were very, very lucky. We kept our whole team together. But it was mentally draining. I'm very lucky. I'm quite strong-minded, and not much really gets me, but still, you're thinking every single day, when am I going to get open? And now that we're open, you're thinking in the back of your head, there's something saying, when are they going to close us down again? Even though they're saying they're not. But when you've been told you're not going to be closed down again, and they have closed you down, something in the back of my head is saying, there's still a chance they might shut us down again this winter. So that's going on in your head. So it takes so much out of you. Thankfully, I can handle it, but I know a lot of guys can't, because a lot of bars and restaurants have been in touch with me, and they've lost their staff, they're losing their business, they've closed down, they're about to close down. So it's very, very draining. It's a horrible industry to be in at the moment for those reasons. But we look at the music and entertainment industry, and they're still not open, and they still have no idea when they're going to open. So they're feeling right now as to how we felt 3 or 4 months ago. And I think the music and entertainment industry thought that they were going to be getting back open, and now they're realizing that there's no roadmap at all, which is exactly where we stood last April. We had no idea when we were going to get a date. So it's there's no denying it. It is really, really tough at the moment.
Obviously, there are lots of restaurant owners who are probably looking to exit the industry, I would say, it's fair to say. And I wonder, do you think that the restaurant industry as a whole will take a hit in the coming years, and that you'll see people starting to move to other industries? And I mean, you'd kind of be crazy to open a restaurant after everything that the government has done at this point.
So I'm 35 years in hospitality, and I've never in my life seen anything like this. And we've gone through the last major recession in 2006, 07, and it was really tough times for a lot of people. But people knew what was going on. It was a recession. They dug deep, they canceled their pensions, they did whatever they had to do. They worked 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. They did whatever they had to do to get through that recession. Now, they basically grinded us to a halt. And that's what this government don't realize. They have made huge mistakes, and they're never going to admit to them, but they've made huge mistakes by stopping an entire industry in its tracks. You can't just go 60 miles an hour again within a day. And that's what happened. So there's a lot of staff who are gone from the industry already, and the government won't agree to it, but because it's their policy, this is why they can't agree to it. A lot of the foreign staff are gone home. So their average monthly salary, pick Croatia, Latvia, Lithuania, Eastern European countries, their average monthly salary is around €600 to €800 if they're lucky enough to get a job. We had a system of PUP payment that went straight into our account, no questions asked, for 9 months. No questions asked. You don't need to be here. So what would you do? You're paying €1,000, €1,500 a month rent, and you can go home, save that rental income, and get your entire PUP paid into your account. What would you do? Of course you're going to go home. And after a month or two, they turn around and went, I can actually go down and work in my local bar as well. I have a separate account. Now, the government won't admit to it because they can't, because it shows that it was fundamentally flawed as to what they did. So we lost 20% of our workforce overnight because they went home. We all remember the last time the social welfare dipped was when the volcano erupted, because a lot of guys were at home. They couldn't come and collect it. So that is exactly what happened. We have a lot of people that didn't know when they were going to get back to work. Bar staff, waiting staff, chefs, kitchen porters. I don't know when I can get back to work. I bought a house with a mortgage where I owe X amount per month. The 350 PUP, whilst it's great, doesn't cut it. I can go back to work and I can get €500 stacking shelves in a supermarket. So they're gone. And they won't come back because now they're saying, do you know what, actually, I don't work nights, I don't have the stress, it's fairly handy enough. So they've changed. The government said, upskill, reskill, go into a new job. So we've lost a percentage to that. And a lot of people's heads were just melted and just went, I'm out. So that's where our industry is now at the moment. And it's worldwide. It's not just Ireland, it is worldwide. There is such a serious lack of staff that's out there. But what the government did, which again was such a big mistake in this country, was they opened up hotels on June the 2nd and not bars and restaurants. So every single hotel around the country, no disrespect, and I might have done the same myself if I was a hotel, because they'd been shut for 6 months too, would go to the bar and restaurant and go, what are you doing for the summer? Oh, we're going to be open. When? Not too sure. Well, we're open tomorrow. So do you want to come work with us? So the bar restaurant staff shifted straight into hotels. And that's what caused a massive amount of pressure. You can see it. There's restaurants all around the country, particularly rural Ireland, that should be 7 days a week, but they can't because they don't have the staff. So they're 5 days a week. So what does that mean? I never think about today or tomorrow. I think about 6 months down the line. So what that means is that those 2 days revenue throughout the entire summer that the bars and restaurants need to get through the winter in rural Ireland is gone. Doesn't take a genius to figure. They're already in financial pressure and they don't realize it yet. But they've missed the best part of 20% of their revenue during the summer season because they couldn't literally open because they didn't have the staff. But again, the government, no. Apparently COVID knows if you're staying the night, so you can go and eat in a bar and restaurant in a hotel, but you can't do it in a bar and restaurant downtown, which was absolutely insanity personified by what this government did. And that's why I shout and scream all the time, because it just didn't make sense.
I saw you talking on Twitter about how to fill the labor shortage, lots of places have been hiring teenagers, 16 and 17-year-olds, but that's only a temporary solution, you were saying, because they'll all be going back to school in a couple of weeks, and then what'll happen, I mean, it'll be a catastrophe for the labor market in these industries. I wonder if you want to speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, again, so like I said, what I say is just, it's an observation. It's what's going on in my opinion. I'm not proclaiming to know the answer to absolutely everything, but I'm just telling you this is what's happening. So our government turned around and said we'll continue the PUP until September. They announced that back in, I think it was around mid-May. So if I was an 18-year-old or 19-year-old college guy going, hang on a second, are you telling me I can get 350 and not work? Well, what would you do? I'd be telling my son, hop on a train if you can, go over to Europe and go interrailing and see the world, because the government's going to pay you for it. So I don't blame any of these college kids for not doing it. I'd have done the exact same thing myself. Also, when the guys who did want to come back to work came back to work, I was thinking, where's half my wage gone on tax? Yeah, you went through the threshold already because of PUP, and so yeah, you're going on to screw this. I'm not gonna, why would it work if I'm losing half of the guys who wanted to do it? So that huge area of an employment market basically vanished, disappeared. And so you're left with 15 and 16-year-olds, which is brilliant for them. Don't get me wrong. If one good thing comes out of this is these kids who probably never would have worked the way they've worked are now doing it. My two sons are working here, 16-year-old and 13-year-old. And Mark's daughter is here, 13-year-old as well, working away. It's brilliant experience for them, because I always say no matter what, everybody should work it in hospitality. You get to learn so much working on the floor, talking with people, how to pour yourself a pint, anything. It's a brilliant industry to be in. But the reality of it is that these kids are gone in 2 weeks, not even back to school. There's one place I know, not too far away from here, that has 30 of these school kids on their roster. 30 of them. What's he doing in 2 weeks' time? Who's he going to fill that roster with? Because September is still traditionally just as busy as August down in rural Ireland. So how's he going to... He's screwed. He's literally screwed. So he's going to have to close 2 days a week at least to make it work. So yeah, it's another issue, and that's why I said you can't let the government off the hook, because it was their actions that caused these consequences, and they didn't listen. So if we want to talk about a pandemic, well, let's get the medical expert in and we'll talk to him. If we're going through a recession, let's get in the top economists and talk to them. None of them came to us in hospitality and went, lads, there's a major issue here in hospitality. They all made their decisions themselves, sitting up in a room and they haven't a clue what they're doing. No disrespect to them, but they have no idea what hospitality means because they've never worked in hospitality. So if they brought me up to their meeting room and said, listen, Paul, what do you think? I said, that's not going to work, lads, because X, Y. Oh yeah, actually, good idea, good point. And now they're saying they're going to extend the PUP again. So why would you work?
I mean, when we talk about PUP, obviously short term, it's fantastic for a lot of people. But as we know, there's going to be long-term consequences for that, both in terms of the national debt, which is, I think, about to hit €250 billion
Correct.
for a country of our size. That's not sustainable. And also, that's going to have to be paid back at some point in the form of tax hikes and all. Do you think people have really realized the full implications of this?
So simply no, because the pandemic has affected a small percentage of people and has completely left the rest of people, my own friends, ringing me, turning around going, what are you shouting and screaming about? And I'm saying, well, your only inconvenience is you're home emptying the dishwasher twice a week. You're still getting your full salary. You're still working. You're still doing what you do. We've been grounded to a halt. And the very people that are going to have to pay this tax are the likes of my friends who were shouting and screaming, saying, why are you giving out? Because it didn't affect them yet. The reality of it is, and here's where we stand. So our national debt, as you correctly say, is almost $250 billion. What the government aren't going to tell you is because they're saying, yeah, but our payments, our interests are down, so it's fine. Our interests are down for one reason and one reason only. The bonds that we had borrowed from the time of the recession were borrowed, for argument's sake, 5%. You'll have some fella go, no, they weren't, they were 5.6, for argument's sake, 5%. In the time of this pandemic, they were able to access basically free money. So they have now, those bonds expired, they've borrowed more money at a much cheaper rate, almost 0% of a rate, to pay off those previous bonds. So what does that tell you is coming down the road? Well, the bonds we have at 0% are going to have to be paid off. So we borrowed an extra 30 billion to be at almost €250 billion, because a couple of years ago we were only at 220 billion. Now we're at €250 billion at a 0% rate. So what's happening in 3, 4, 5 years' time? Lads, those bonds are expiring. Great, we'll get a few more at 0%. Actually, they're 2%, and you need to get another 30 billion. So now we're at almost 300 billion of a national debt, paying back at a much higher interest rate. Doesn't take a genius to figure out taxation through the roof. Full stop. There's no other way of doing it.
Taxation as well as cuts and austerity and all the rest of it.
Absolutely. And so I see myself as a major probably recession stroke depression coming down the line, because mathematics is the most important language in the world, and the mathematics we're dealing with right now at the moment dictate that that's the only way that's going to come, that's going to happen.
I've heard you say that case numbers are irrelevant when it comes to COVID, and that it's really the deaths that we should be looking at. I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so we're being told the vaccine works and to trust science. That's what we've been told from day one. So the vaccine either works or it doesn't. And if the vaccine works, which in my opinion it seems to be, that it doesn't matter about a case number of COVID. It doesn't matter if there's 5,000 case numbers a day happening. And this crap has to stop being brainwashed, thrown into us every day, case numbers of this. People are sitting at home, what are the case numbers today? It's nonsense. What this is doing to people's heads is incredible. So if we've got 5,000 cases a day, and it's transpiring to next to, an increase in hospitalization at a marginal rate that can be controlled and monitored and dealt with. Same with ICU, which is, it's around the 50 mark. But again, don't forget, we were told if we reopen, it's going to go through. It hasn't. But if the death rate isn't increasing, well, then we really need to have a very good look at ourselves and go, okay, so do we need all these restrictions? Because it's not transpiring. We were told NEFIT, and they can't be left off the hook either. None of these guys have been challenged. They are all interviewed on their own. Have you ever had Tony Hoolan being interviewed with me, or somebody like me? So hang on a second, Tony, you told us worst case scenario, 700,000. Almost triple the amount of case numbers in 3 months than what we've had in the last 14 or 16. Are you sure this is possible with this Delta rate? Worst case scenario, yeah, that could happen. And the death rate is going to be half of what we've had for the last 14 or 16 months. Are you sure your modeling procedures are right? Because that seems a bit bizarre. Yes, that's worst case scenario, but we're definitely looking at this amount. It hasn't happened. And the death rate isn't matching what's going on with the case numbers. And you look across the pond and you see Man United playing Liverpool in a packed stadium of 50,000 people, and you're kind of going, does Delta variant have a completely different strain here in Ireland than the rest of the world? Because why can't we do it? Why are we allowed? And now we're saying we're going to put 40,000 into Croke Park, but we have a race meeting here in Killarney with 500. The racing industry has been absolutely decimated. You're going, hang on a second, lads, that's all outdoor too as well. If we can have 50,000 in Croke Park and the racetrack is the size of Croke Park, surely we could have 10,000. Nothing adds up. And that's what's wrecked my head. The inconsistencies. It's the only consistent thing the government have gotten right, is their inconsistencies. And that's why people's heads are just going, you've lost us. You've absolutely lost us.
You've not been too kind to many of the industry associations, like the Restaurant Association of Ireland and so on. Why is that?
Look, no disrespect. I think they were very weak. I'm very black and white, and they'll probably see this and they go, that's just my opinion. I think they were very weak. I think they're going to suffer big time with their membership, because a lot of their members were turning around. I never joined any association. I was never part of them. Thankfully, I can represent myself. So I turn around, but I'm looking at a lot of members that I know who just said, we're not going to renew our membership. Because in my opinion, well, let's not badmouth somebody who's not here. Let's say what I did and that they didn't. So I went gung-ho and said, listen, government, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, this needs to be done, that needs to be done. And let's just say they probably weren't as vocal as I was initially. But I mean, in fairness to them, look, they have come on board, but we heard about a court case that never happened. The whole vaccine passport thing, that was never passed by any members. It was an association that agreed with a government. And now we're in this ridiculous position of vaccine passports, whether you check or whether you don't check. So I think that if they came together, when I launched the plan, which was the single, in my opinion, way that we could have ended this months ago, was to go after the very Achilles heel that the politicians have. If you don't do this, lads, we're not voting for you. It's very simple. It's the only Achilles heel that a politician or a political group has. And I think a lot of political groups and politicians are going to suffer because of this. Because we're saying, how can it be done in a hotel but not with me? And if you can explain that, I back down, I say, fair enough. We were told in the Shalland and in the Dáil, there's no scientific proof that what we're saying is true, but we're just going to do it anyway. So if we had it open on the 2nd of June, like all the hotels and all the restaurants, case numbers were around maybe 300. And think about this. They wouldn't let us open when case numbers were around 300, but they let us open when case numbers got to about 12 or 1300. So either they were wrong then, or they were wrong when they let us open. But case numbers, by their modeling, and the fact that indoor dining is now open, it's gone up maybe 300 or 400 a day. Hasn't gone through the roof. And what's going to happen in next week or in 2 weeks' time when the kids go back to school? Case numbers potentially will go up, more than likely will go up, because you've got people crammed inside in a classroom. Indoor dining, it's all their fault. How do I know? History has a great habit of repeating itself. Exactly what happened last year. September, the end of September, the numbers started growing. Kids back to school, kids back to college. So it's not indoor dining, but they shut us down. And I'll never forgive him for it, ever. If Micheál Martin came in here and walked into my restaurant, I'd say, get out. And I don't care if he sees this. Wouldn't let him near the place. Absolutely, because he destroyed our industry for being so weak. He'd never stood up to what Neffet were saying. So who's running the country? Is it our government, or is it Neffet? Is it senior civil servants behind the scenes that we don't know about? But it's certainly not this government, because they are unbelievably weak. Can't make a decision. Make a decision, even if it's wrong. Make the decision and stand by it. That's where we are.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Thanks very much for coming out, guys.